city. Oh, they are finishing the nation while calling it black on black. But everybody knows they are behind it. Without any publicity. They are finishing the nation. Won't somebody help out there? Yelling about somewhere to blue.
Hi, Nana Sule. I'm not sure if we're meant to hear you. Oh, I see you're on mute. Sorry, and there's music in the background. Sorry.
Yeah, so I unfortunately had to mute. I'm so sorry about that. But thank you so much for entertaining us for the time being. Warm welcome to everyone. It's afternoon here in Nigeria. Good afternoon to everyone. And you know, whatever the time zone you're in, you're calling from, we're so grateful to have you. My name is Nana Sule, and I will be moderating today's session. But before that, I just want to say a very big thank you from all of us at the Liberation Alliance Africa. It is not, we don't even take it for granted that you took out your time today to, you know, join us and listen to us and share this wonderful discussion that we're going to have with us. We'll just wait about 2 minutes so we can, you know, let other people, give other people the opportunity to join in, and then we'll kickstart immediately. Don't go anywhere. We'll be starting as soon as possible. So just to, okay, 1 minute. Let's just go over a bit of house rules for everyone who is here currently. We're going to try to stay mute as much as possible if we're not speaking. There will be opportunity for questions towards the end of the session, but if you don't want to, you know, ask that question yourself, there's always the chat box where you can leave your questions, your comments. We'll be looking through and reading. Once again, thank you guys for joining us, and we'll start in a minute. We're just giving more people the opportunity to join us.
Here's a song that was written for us by Hugh Masekela. He calls it Soweto Blues. The children got a letter from their master. It said no more Tosa, Sutu, no more Zulu. Refusing to comply, they sent an answer. That's when the policeman came to the rescue. Children were flying, bullets dying, the mothers screaming and crying. The fathers were working in the city. The evening news brought out all the publicity. Just a little atrocity. deep in the city, somewhere to blue, somewhere to blue, somewhere to blue, somewhere to blue.
Okay, thank you so much for that beautiful music. I just couldn't help, bobbing my head to it. Surely lifted the spirit for me. I hope it did for some of you guys too. Once again, my name is Nara Hawasile. I'm the Communications Associate for Liberation Alliance Africa, and it's so wonderful to have you all here with us today. I'm saying some introductions in the chat box, and thank you guys so much for tuning in from all regions of Africa. We have Jama from Gambia, we have Nekasa from Kenya, Tawakalit from Nigeria, Claire from Senegal. Thank you guys so much for taking out the time to just be here and be with us. We do not take it for granted. So let's not waste too much more time. Welcome to Liberation Alliance Africa, LAA's maiden edition of the Disrupting Colonial Legacies in African series, DCL series. So the history of leadership in Africa is marked significantly by colonial disruption of traditional leadership and communal living. There is the need to reflect, on the colonial legacy of leadership and its influence on state formation, for example, and the method of governance. It's institutionalized in post-independence Africa. We can look at what's happening currently, especially in terms of the functional democracy, the shift in citizens' participation in the electoral processes. We saw it in Nigeria, for example. Lots of young persons, women, were more concerned with who leads them and in what ways they are led, but generally electoral processes across Africa. This has provided, an insight to a call for a citizen-centered electoral process across Africa, So with the DCL series, the Disrupting Colonial Legacies series, we seek, to interrogate the system of political, educational, economic leadership currently marred by the legacy of colonialism, oppression, and the disruption, of cultural evolution. It is because of this that we're having this discussion today, and we're just going to share knowledge and learn from our speakers, interrogate the ways that colonialism has affected us, not only, in terms of how they have ravaged our colonial past is marred by the ravaging of our resources, our purses, but even to the current mind subjugations, and to the many ways that colonialism has affected us. My guests today are two powerful women. One has warned me to not introduce her as how did she put it? As this wonderful beautiful enigma, but nevertheless, she's someone who is so instrumental in today's discussion because she literally was part of making this discussion happen. She is the co-dreamer of Liberation Alliance Africa. That is to say, she and our other co-dreamer started this beautiful baby up. And it's only because of them that we're going to have this wonderful discussion today. I'm talking about none other than Omolara Oriye, who is a feminist. She's a human rights activist. She's a lawyer. She's the co-dreamer of Liberation Alliance Africa. Please say hi.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, I'm so happy to see everyone. I am filled with joy and feminist joy to see African women, Black women from across the world, come into this conversation. I'm beyond the moon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And the next person who will be sharing, from her wealth of knowledge, who will be bathing us in feminist glory. Bathing us in feminist glory is Rosebell Kagumire. I hope I'm pronouncing that well. If I'm not, I'm sure I'm going to learn along the line. She's a writer and editor of African Feminism. She's a Pan-African feminist activist who works at the intersection of media, gender, race, and development. Rosebell is a council member at the Nalafem Collective, where last year she teamed up with other authors to launch I Am Nala book, with her writing on the struggles for reproductive justice. She has co-edited the book, Challenging Patriarchy, the Role of Patriarchy in the Rollback of Democracy. Rosebell sits on the advisory board of the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy and was recognized by Adams Media as one of the 100 most influential women in Africa for the 2021 edition. Ooh, powerhouse here today, people, powerhouse. The World Economic Forum recognized Rosebell as one of the young global leaders under 40. Rosebell was honored with the Anna Gray 2018 award for her contribution to digital democracy, justice, and equality on the African continent by Africtivist, a network of African activists for democracy. She holds a master's degree in media, peace, and conflict studies from the UN-mandated University of Peace in Costa Rica. She has done short-term studies in nonviolent conflict at the Fletcher School and the Global Leadership and Public Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. Her undergraduate degree is in mass communication from Makerere University, Uganda. So it is with feminist joy in my heart and so much pride that I say, let's make warm welcome to Rosebell. Please say hello.
Sorry, that was muted. Thank you so much, Nana. And I was like, why is Nana saying all these things about me? I thought it was gonna be the rule book following Omolara's guidance. That is fine. Thank you. Happy to join.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you to our beautiful, wonderful speakers for joining us, and thank you to everyone who has joined us today. Please keep the introductions coming in the chat box, and if you have any questions or comments or observations, please leave them there. We'll be looking through as we go along. So let's jump right into the conversation. I know we have busy women with us today. So the first question is to you, Rosebell. What do you think is the significance of starting and sustaining conversations on the evolution of leadership in Africa?
Sorry, Nana, could you
Okay, let me repeat that. Okay. What do you think is the significance of, starting conversations and sustaining these conversations on the evolution of leadership in Africa?
Great, thank you so much. What a topic. I mean, looking at where we all are, like in different countries and as the continent, I think this is a very pertinent question because I'm sure you're either in a country coming out of a dictatorship, in a transition, or if it has had elections and change of power. Has there been a translation of these changes? Have they translated into, better lived realities, material conditions of the people? So really, we are at the point where it's very important for us to discuss leadership, because whose voice, who gets to be the leader, not only at the top in terms of government, but socioeconomic, cultural, spiritual. It's very, very important to understand the leadership as holistically, because we tend to look at the politics and forget other areas. And I think it's a very important conversation, no matter where you were in Africa or diaspora, in terms of at this moment where we are as a continent, both internally, internal struggles with colonially inherited states that are struggling to make cohesion. We are seated in countries that were forced to be countries, so nobody in our ancestors sat down and said, oh, now let's get together. So these are countries that were made through violence, through enormous violence. They had to break down literally all the states they found in the continent in order to make this kind of constructs. So we are struggling within constructs that we never made, but also that don't make sense to us in so many ways, whether you are from different angles, which we'll get in for sure. But it doesn't, up to now, sometimes it just doesn't make sense. Why are we in this construct? And how did we get here? Why should we be here? And is this the only place, is this the only way we can go about it? And looking at inward, but also looking at the place of Africa currently in the global order of things, and how it has been since our independence, and have we actually got independence? And what is the role of leadership there? How are we going to shape leadership that is going to be instrumental in repositioning us and facing the current global challenges that we see as a continent? So I think it's a very, very important topic to think of leadership just as a whole, as holistically, but also from different levels of our societies. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Rosebell. I think the key thing you said there was how we are seated in countries that forced us to, in constructs that forced us to be countries. Yes, that's really, really deep, and I think that's something to really, think about with this conversation. Thank you so much for that observation. The next question actually goes to my boss, Omolara. How can conversations about leadership in Africa evolve to better accommodate gender diverse and feminist perspectives?
Thank you so much. Also, I thought we agreed that I wasn't your boss, that we were all working together. But absolutely delighted to be here. What a joy. It's amazing to kind of come together with people who are thinking of these things that we all deeply worry about individually, but then we have these pockets of conversations where we are able to come together and kind of put a voice to what we are thinking. We're not reinventing the wheel. We are here. We're all working toward liberation. When most of us, to answer your question, Nana, when most of us think about Pan-Africanism and its major icons and major milestones, we don't instinctively think about women. Women rarely come to mind. Because the history of Pan-Africanism, the history of the liberation movement on the African continent and in diaspora has kind of been presented to exclusively include men. However, it is our job as feminists to critically interrogate this half century of work that has been done to liberate us as a people. And that is why it's important to think about disrupting not just the colonial legacies of how we are, because on some level we have been, we have kind of fallen in the pocket of neocolonialism through assimilation, through diplomacy, and all of that stuff. However, our critical job as feminists is to, analyze and create a proper analysis of why liberation seems to be out of the reach of women and gender diverse folks on the African continent and in diaspora. What does that say to me? It says to me that even though history has erased women as liberation, crusaders and people who have worked for the struggle, it is time to begin to look at those things that were created to push women to the back so that the conversation can be simple. You know what? When I think about the idea around polarism and the binary idea of things, it is that colonialism and its resulting bondage created all these binaries for easy manipulation. So when we are going to liberate ourselves, the first thing we need to look at taking away is the binaries, the tool, the divide and control tool, divide and conquer tool that the white man brought to this continent. And now we are kind of attached to it and we cannot let go of it. So we have to think critically about the role of women within the space for liberation. We have to think critically about the contributions of our ancestors to the space for liberation. And we have to build those blocks for future liberation for coming generations. So I think that how can we expand this conversation to include women and gender diverse persons? It is by breaking down the binary structure of thinking that the white man brought to us and is forcing upon us through neocolonialism. First, you start with colonialism and you tell us our way of life is not good enough. And now we come back, we're like, okay, yeah, we're doing it with you. Then you come and say, we've changed our minds. Now we are going to change what you believe. When you look at places like Uganda, Kenya, Ghana, and Nigeria, and South Africa, what you see is the direct control of colonial powers through religious fundamentalisms, trying to remind us that that binary thinking must be remained in our minds. And what we must do is to decolonize our minds and be able to disrupt those thinkings. First, remove binary thinking. Men did not create the world. Women carried societies on their backs for centuries. And if you will not thank us, we will thank ourselves. So when I think about expanding the conversation to include women and gender diverse persons, I think that we should think of decoloniality as an ongoing process, a process that allows us to start from the site of the wound, which is our minds, a process that allows us to genuinely let go of the tools of the master, which we cannot use to disrupt the master's house. The mindset is to create our own tools. And what are those tools? The understanding that feminist perspectives and gender diverse perspectives are a whole part and parcel of Africanness. Queerness is part of Africanness. Being a woman is part of Africanness, because, and so what we need to do is to break down that binary thinking, is to oppose that binary thinking in whatever spaces we find ourselves, is to determine for ourselves, how are we gonna be as a people? How do we want to move forward as a people? But how do we do that without conversation? So in whatever space you find yourself, I want you to think to yourself, how can I push back against the colonial legacies of leadership that wants me to believe that somehow a man who is straight belongs to society, and then women must find their way around those spaces, and then that gender diverse people do not even belong in those spaces. Our ancestors tilled this land, and we have every right to move with audacity. We have every right to move with knowledge and critical consciousness of who we are and how we have built these communities. Thank you so much. I don't want to go to kind of like go on and on and on. So yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, that was beautiful, beautiful and powerful. You know, one of the things I look forward to these days is just starting our days with our daily chat at LAA, because I always leave fully, you know, fulfilled by the words, the powerful moving words. And like you said, we have every right to move with audacity. I think that's one of the things I'm going to take home with me today, is that, well, I am home, but nonetheless, you know, we have to move with audacity. We have to be able to demand what we want and get it, not just demand, but go out and actually get it. And, you know, I think another key thing you said that really resonated with me, and I'm sure with so many beautiful women, so many women that are here today, is how we have carried society on our backs as women. And if they don't thank us, we are going to thank ourselves. So, that was really, it touched my soul. It touched me, I have to admit. So let's keep the conversation moving. Rosebell, if you could please come in here and just, you know, share some thoughts on this question. How can African feminists use storytelling and other cultural tools to disrupt these legacies and promote more inclusive leadership models?
Thank you.
Should I come again?
Thank you. No. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Oh, thank you so much, Omolara. I think it's very important to really pick back a bit on what Omolara said about leadership and what we see. I remember, I think it was like 4 years ago, I went to the African Union to celebrate Africa Day. And we were moving around this building, and everything on the surrounding us was men. And I just felt like very sad, like a deep sadness sitting in that building, and really feeling sad, because everyone, this idea of founding fathers, I don't know who brought it, because those men did not fight alone. They didn't pay they are not the only ones who paid the price. They didn't pay even the highest price. People died, right? How do we even memorialize all the struggles that we went through when we are really stuck on an idea of a founding father? When did he sit and find it? People came before him. His own ancestors fought colonizers. So how do we bestow a man to be the face and to take the seat of everything that we have fought for? Is so absurd. It's so absurd. And I think we must continue to really push and say we need to really diversify our spaces, how we memorize our struggle, how we memorize our public spaces. Why should the African Union have men from different countries, men called founding fathers? This is a very foreign idea. When you come to African societies, people fought together, women not only fought actively but on the front lines, but they were supporting every day. They upheld families while all these struggles were going on. Otherwise, there'll be nobody left back home, children, you know. They were heads of household as all these men were moving around, those who didn't be on the front line. It is very absurd to find that our struggles as a people culminate into one man, and that's what we remember. And it's not just colonialization. Look at South Africa, apartheid. Everywhere you go is Mandela overshadowing everything. Yes, he suffered, he paid the price, but he's not the only one. It's very important to understand how patriarchy robs of us, not only women and gender diverse people, but also the other men and other people who fought alongside. So telling a whole story of generations of fighting through one man is very, very unacceptable. So we still see that being done, right? So, and horribly so, that of course in South Africa, to have Mandela who, as an image who has been, you know, kind of hijacked as a Western kind of, you know, this image of Mandela as a saint, as a peaceful man, as like, these are the tactics used to pacify people who have been violated and oppressed. Mandela himself was not necessarily peaceful in his struggle, and he didn't need to be. But the idea that the end result you have is this peace and harmony, and forgetting the troubles people went through. And you look at for because of the binary that Omolara talked about, is that in order to have a Saint Mandela, you have a villain who is Winnie Mandela. And this is actively done, even in the memorization of the apartheid movement and ending of the apartheid movement, anti-apartheid movement. So it's very absurd, and we need to actively dismantle that. The other thing that came to my mind was the fact that when we look at the fight for independence, the erasure of women, not only recent, but also women, the place of class. So men who could speak the foreign language, the white man's language, had more opportunities to be the ones to be the founding fathers, right? So whereas people who were more generally maybe from villages or from different socio-economic strata did not have the chance, right? So it carries forward how our politics, how our leadership is viewed, right? Because you must be able to speak the foreign language in order to be seen as intelligent, as you know, a leader. Eloquence being measured in terms of how much English you can speak. We see, unfortunately, for example, in Uganda, you see figures like Queen Muhumuza, who was a spiritual woman who had thousands and thousands of followers, had influence in Rwanda, fighting against the Belgians and the French and Germans and British in just that enclave at the Rwanda-Congo-Ugandan border, where she had so much power because she was seen as a medium. She was seen as a spiritual leader, not only anti-colonial, but she was trying to reclaim indigenous beliefs and spirituality, and reminding us that we too are spiritual. We don't have to look to the white man's packaged religion or religion from anywhere, and reminding us of the place of indigenous beliefs in the movements, in our movement, in our struggle to end oppression that was colonization. So it's very important, those lessons, when we stick in the binary and men at the top, we really lose a great history on how people have resisted and how we too can resist and how we too can lead, because these women were from, you know, were leading, were seen as influential figures. Even up to now, she still has followers in Uganda and Rwanda after generations. And these are not stories that are told. So when you hear a story of Uganda's independence, it's the eloquent Milton Obote, who was well-educated, you know, the erasure, the imperial erasure of our struggle, and making people who had not accessed privileges of imperialism second-class citizens, even within the struggle. And we still see that up to today, you know, we still see that reproduced in many ways, that we have national, you have national laws, constitutions, which are not translated into local languages. We have a whole constitution existing in my country for how long? It is not in a local language, you know. Can you imagine? We have laws being passed daily, but where's the translation? Who knows what the law is? So you have this state that is continuously a colonial state, out of touch with, not interested in whether people understand it or not, but people must abide by it. So it's very, very important to see all these nuances in then what kind of leadership we end up with when we forget, when we discard all these examples that I'm giving. And I think it's great to read. I wanted to give a like a citation of great work by These Bones Will Rise Again. Panache wrote eloquently about the role of spirituality in the struggle for Zimbabwe's independence, and citing women and the role of women and women being spiritual leaders. And what we get post-independence is this erasure of women and spirituality, women massive being followers, and it's just like coloniality being used to erase African women's power. And once someone is eroded spiritually, to me, you can struggle to really bring other things, parts of your society, into order. So what we have is really a disarray of all sorts of things, because we are still riding the colonial architecture. We are still riding with the colonial architecture of how things were left, both in terms of class, in terms of gender, in terms of when you think of indigenous communities, like in Uganda, we have Batwa community, while in Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, and the fact that they're erased in everyday conversations. When you hear conversations every day in Uganda, in Rwanda, these are communities that are minorities, but they have lived in those parts of Africa longest. They are indigenous communities, and the colonization really took away their rights. So we have to think on these issues, that what does it mean to adopt what they call democracy, which is a rule of majority? What does that mean for an Africa that is being destabilized, where societies were cut into almost halves? You find one society in 5 countries on the continent. It means that these people will never really be heard in whatever context, in whatever state they're in, because they cannot form a majority. And rethinking of the systems, then how can people be heard? What does the will of the people look like? What does the rule of law then look like if laws are being litigated in foreign languages and imposed on people, and people sitting, for example, in Kampala and saying, oh, the parliament is having a public hearing. Why is it having a public hearing in English in Kampala? Is that a law that is representative, right? So we have to rethink all these ways that the state is being run. You can talk about local government, but still we find that there is really limitations, that leadership, the imposition of colonial power leadership at the top-down leadership, as heavy as it is, as non-inclusive as it is, affects every other aspect of our lives. So I think that to come into a question of like using feminist storytelling tools, it's very important to understand the history. It's very important to understand the stories that are left behind. Then we can tell our stories. Now we have different platforms, but we are not going to be really effective, and we're not going to do justice to our stories if we don't know what is being left behind, even for ourselves. Like, what is the story that was left behind? What do you know? Especially when you have education systems that are still colonial. You know, having an education right now, I was checking my niece's homework, someone telling her that the father is the head of the family. You know, what is that? You know, why is it important? Why are you educating my child in this? What, you know, so we have these systems. We still have kids answering that John Speke discovered the Nile. You know, hello, it's 2023. You know, where is decolonization? So we need to think, I think we need to tap into our histories to see forms of leadership that women provided, and in many ways how societies were more inclusive, that had different leadership tactics that weren't necessarily on, even when it was like a kingdom. For example, in Uganda, in Buganda, the Queen Mother's office was very powerful, had a say in the matters of the state. It had a big say that I think in one of the texts of one of the colonizers said actually he had to bargain between the king and the Queen Mother. So this is how powerful, you know, leadership was. But when they arrived there, but we have a shell of what we used to be, and we are struggling with it because it doesn't make sense. So I think for me, feminist storytelling must always be cognizant of the oppressive systems that we are dealing with currently, what we are inheriting, and in what forms those oppressive system structures are kind of bending but not being broken. They are bending and changing form, and oftentimes it looks like we have made progress. Then something happens and you realize, oh, we didn't make any progress. You know, the story of COVID and the massive sexual abuse of girls and kids on this continent. We thought, oh my God, 20 years of having laws here and there and campaigning, that we had done something. But no, we did not make societies actually accountable. We have not made societies protective of children's rights. We have not, we have not made that much. I think COVID, those days of lockdown reminded us in many ugly ways what remains, the work that has not been done. So I think it's very, very important to understand the structure. Is it moving? Is it changing form? Is it being broken? What are the achievements? But also to know that we have had quite good role models in different ways, and look at those and say, how do we learn more? Because oftentimes those are on the margins, and constantly looking at the margins and say, what is there? What can I learn from it? How do we bring this to the center? I think that is what is important.
All right, thank you so very much. Thank you so very much, Rosebell. That's really, really insightful addition to our conversation. I saw you raise your hand. Omolara, did you have something to add to that?
Oh no, I was clapping. It was a clap. It wasn't a hand.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So many things to take from that conversation, especially the whole idea of founding fathers. I mean, who did they find? Where did they find them? Those are things that we have to ask ourselves. And, in the context of spirituality too, I mean, they came and told us this is who to believe, how to do the belief, how to worship, and told us that our means of worship, our ways of worship is, fraudulent, it's archaic, it's barbaric. But then who's to decide what is why did they have that superiority we can, start to begin to unpack, especially, even in names, the way we name ourselves, who says that being an Elizabeth, is maybe better than being an Omolara and all those things. Perhaps these little things that we think are little are what fits into our subconscious and, from the way that we look into things. I think particularly we'll take home the idea about, constitutions being written in foreign languages. Who are the laws meant for if they cannot understand the laws that are being written, that have been written for them? But quickly, let's take another question to Omolara. Thank you very much. So the question to you is, how can Pan-African and other liberation movements collaborate to address the issues of colonial legacies in leadership in Africa?
Thank you. That's an interesting question. But I would like to start with reflecting on a couple of things that Rosebell mentioned, and that is number one, telling the whole story. One of the things that we were reflecting on when we started Liberation Alliance was that there is a need to kind of tell the whole story. There is a need to understand where we are coming from. There is a need to understand where we are going, because we came to this conclusion from the idea that we make some progress and then we roll back, right? And critical consciousness is the only way that we can create a frame of reference in the minds of everyone to be able to assess their societies and be able to identify what needs to be done. So what I think is going to be the collaborating factor is the idea that we embrace critical thinking as analyzed by Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks says without critical thinking, you don't know anything about your life. You don't know where you're coming from. You don't know where you're going to. And also Yoruba adage, provides us with insight on that. It says a person who does not know where they're coming from is not likely to know where they're going. So we are saying that we want to understand where we are coming from because the history has been marred by erasure, by the hiding, of important facts. So we want to unearth that history, and we want to build frameworks upon which we can build our liberation going forward. So feminist storytelling is at the heart of what we do at Liberation Alliance. Now, how can we collaborate? One of the things that we do is that we work with the ethos of our ancestors. And what are those things? It's solidarity, kinship, and the passing down of information. We read in the story of African Americans about how they plaited their braids and put food in there. That is wisdom on a level that no colonial power can contest. I always make a remark about slavery. And I say that what was stolen from Africa was not people. It was an entire economic system. It was not just people, because people were stolen. It was an entire economic system upon which capitalism is built. So you treat people who have figured out a communal way of existing, you rob them of the opportunity to evolve organically, and then you steal what they have and you turn them into capital. That is one of the atrocities of slavery that we still see till this day. That is why Black emancipation, Black liberation will always be more important than Black excellence. Now, when we think about how we can collaborate, first thing is solidarity. But how can we have solidarity without having convictions and shared ideology? So a shared ideology, shared conviction will provide us with a with a platform for solidarity amongst ourselves. Two, the passing down of information. Women have saved this world over and over again through the passing down of information. We are not going to reinvent the wheel. We need to dig our foot down and understand how women have built societies that kept them safe and kept information passing down from one person to the other before colonial powers came through. And the third thing is kinship. One of the major things that I think about as an African feminist is the importance of kinship. We don't have to give each other, superficial kinds of love. But we have to understand that there is an opportunity for us to build the Africa of our dreams. There is an opportunity for us to determine that, hey, I will consciously stand in solidarity with my people to build the future of our dreams. And what do you think women are doing in that space? Women are standing in the gap in analysis, in lawyering, in strategic litigation, in consciousness raising, in service provision, in healthcare. Women are standing in the gap. Now, what are we doing here? We want to ensure a situation where all the laborers are featured at the prize giving day. All the laborers have a voice. When we share power, we also share responsibility. One of the things I'm most passionate about is the democratization of power on the African continent. Rosebell mentioned something very important about how, democracy was sold to us as a rule of the majority. But what we have found is that it's a top to bottom ruling. As a lawyer who worked on access to justice for about 6 years, one thing that I realized is that when you go to the courtroom and you meet a person who is being charged with whatever crime, they are usually surprised. They don't even know that that law exists. So do you want to imagine the mind of somebody who was doing something they thought was perfectly normal, and all of a sudden they land in prison and they are awaiting trial for 6 years? They have not been able to move from point A to point B because they need to understand that there is a law that precludes me from doing this, and then they can be able to understand accountability and consequences. But that we don't have. So I believe that not only are we going to interrogate the colonial legacies of leadership in Africa, we're going to interrogate the legacies of colonialism on education, on economics, on cultural beliefs, on gender and gender identity, on every single aspect of our lives, because these interrogations allows us to be accountable. We are accountable for our journey, and we are going to be accountable for our future. So how do we work together? 3 things: solidarity, kinship, and sharing of information. If we do these three things, collaboration will be possible between all of us. But how can we build these three things? By removing the idea that the white man is the epitome of wisdom. By removing the idea that the white man is the epitome is the pinnacle of sophistication. Because this thing is drawn into our minds and we are socialized to behave in that manner. Therefore, if we do not change the way we think, we will not change the way we behave. Look at what happened during COVID. We realized quickly that laws were not enough, that there is a need for us to take back women's autonomy in traditional grassroots spaces, that awareness will never go out of fashion. It doesn't matter what the donor community says, raising awareness will never go out of fashion. And that's why I love the new wave, of consciousness in feminist philanthropy that continues to realize that the people at the forefront of these struggles must determine their futures, must determine their solutions, must use the tools that are accessible and available to them to create the futures that they want and they want to invest in. Thank you.
Oof. Oh my God, well done. That was so inspirational, especially just thinking, about how it cuts deeper than what was physically done, but also into our subconscious. And I like what you said about if we do not change the way we think, we cannot change the way we behave. I think that's really, really, beautiful addition to this conversation. It's also to remind us that Omolara mentioned that the way we can collaborate will involve three things: solidarity, the passing and sharing of information amongst ourselves, and internship. And that to achieve all this, what we need to do is to remove the idea that excellence is in the shape, in the image of the white. So what we'll do now is, I see we have a wonderful, wonderful conversation going on in the chat. But I'll just make room for us to ask questions if we're interested. Before we continue, let's just, if you're interested, please indicate so I can unmute you, and you can ask our wonderful, wonderful speakers some of the questions that I know you have. And if you don't want to, ask by yourself, I can help you do that. Just indicate on the chat, drop your questions, and then I'll pick them up, and we can go on from there. But for now, if you have a question, let me see you indicate that, and I will unmute you, please. If you want to contribute to this discussion, now is the time. I also just want to thank you all once more for, taking out the time to be here. We do not take it for granted at all. Thank you so much. You can share your reflections, your comments across all social media handles. Please tag us at Liberation AA for Twitter, and on Instagram we're at Liberation Alliance. And you can share that with the hashtag DCL series. Okay, someone has asked a question. Let me. Are there books on African? Okay, Elena is asking if there are books on African matriarchy and how roles were distributed. Are there books on African matriarchy and how roles were distributed? Rosebell, Omolara, would any of you like to answer that? Do you have any resource on that you can share?
Yeah, so on my end, I will try to find a link and put it in the chat so that we can explore some of the materials. Also, we have a colleague, a friend on the call, that is Nimisire. Nimisire, please, if you are still on the call, can you put the link to the feminist resources that you have started gathering? I don't have a particular book or resource on feminist matriarchy, but I have a few articles that have explored pre-colonial, societies and how we lived, back then. Now, it is not for us to romanticize pre-colonial Africa because women have always been an endangered species. However, when we think about pre-colonial Africa, we should think about one grouse. Did we get the opportunity to organically evolve? No. When your process is truncated like that, anything is possible. So we will share a couple of links to materials that we've got. And if we find any in particular that speaks on on African matriarchy, I will be happy to share. So if Elena wants to share their email address in the chat box, we can copy that, and then we will send you some work, some materials if we find that. Thank you so much. Nana, let's continue, please. Oh, no, okay. I think her hand is up. Diakumba's hand is up.
Okay, let me get to her.
People, I just wanted to thank you and to use the voice on the call and the recording. Sorry for the disturbance of my own little oppressor. But I think it's important that we thank the sisters who have organized this, who have taken the time to share their knowledge with us. This is the way we roll in pre- and post-colonial feminist Africa. Thank you, my sisters. I wish we were speaking the same language so that we could say it in a language that is not the second, not the third, not the fourth language in our lives. Thank you, solidarity, and thank you for making the life of exilees like me better by joining you on an early morning. Thank you, my sister. The tears are here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. This means a lot, like we said, Liberation Alliance, if it's just one person we can reach out to, and we can have a shift in consciousness, which then we have more than fulfilled. We are more than fulfilled. But let's quickly, go on to the other questions. I know my speakers are busy people. So quickly now, Rosebell, please, can you answer what can we learn, from emerging frontiers of horizontal leadership and participatory philanthropy to promote a decolonial and liberatory, approach to leadership in Africa?
Thank you so much. I was actually in the chat sharing some of the work we are doing. One of the very important piece that we just published, that I'm editing a series on African feminisms with at African Arguments. We had a great piece today, last week on funding, on feminism and cooptation, how cooptation of feminist agenda with the funders' agenda. So this is a very, very important, I'm sharing that by this very important piece by Caroline Kioko from Kenya, and she analyzes the trends on how funding has been working at the area of funding, how we need to critique it and what's going on, where do we need to go. And of course, the funding has historically followed the channels of like how colonization happens. So you will find like certain funders will go in a certain place, and also there's always been the use of the funding to try to recently, when people have been talking about like issues like reparation, countries are like, oh, we are giving this much funding, but funding is not reparation. So trying to take us back to say, no, even the funding you're doing is just a small drop in what you should be doing, what you should pay back and the current, not only historically, but also what you're continuing to plunder from our countries. So it's very, very important when you hear people starting to hijack the conversation around reparations and racial justice in the African context, and using funding, which has always been deployed to actually further the interests of both countries and also the individuals who are always powerful, right? So it's always the most powerful. How do you ask yourself, how do you rise above a world that is so plagued by so much injustice and historical marginalization and stealing of centuries of hard labor of societies into another hemisphere, and then you rise on top of that to be a billionaire. It's very, very important to critique capitalism, even where the funding is coming from, and it's always used to further certain interests, to further certain views of how we should be moving. And these views are not always in line with our feminist struggle. It's very important that the control and the use of funding as a mechanism to further marginalize, actually, and control, control where what we can say, where we can say it. Because if you put funds here, then people will move towards that place, because we are living in very precarious situation. We are currently, all of us, in the middle of an economic crisis, literally. So funding is very important player in terms of which issues get elevated and which ones don't. So it's very important to challenge the ecosystem, to say, this is where the funding should be, and this is the kind of funding we need, because how do you survive in a very shrinking space at home, politically, and at the same time with trying to get funding from people who still care about the sensibilities of the oppressors that we also have in our own countries. So it's a very important discourse to see, and I'm glad to see the rise of issues around African philanthropy, because the reality is that all of us, me and my friend, we joke a lot that we run small NGOs for our clans, because every time you get money, a good chunk goes somewhere and you cannot easily account for it. So we always joke, but this is actually the reality of codependence and interdependence that we live in. So to think that funding is always something outside, also we need to delink ourselves from that kind of thinking, because having been born in a village, and I still have good roots in my village, I live in Dakar. I'm part of so many societies in my village where we contribute money for different causes. So it's very important to understand that giving is not something that necessarily is only the big and powerful outside Africa that happens, but that every day we give. So how do we rethink the knowledge around funds and funding our causes and our movements, and oftentimes when we see the funds dwindle outside, sometimes we need to think of what are the alternatives. In what ways have we always cared, and would we still care as societies that we can actually contribute? And of course, the internet has helped us to kind of connect us on the continent, to see different causes, and people, trust me, they do contribute. So how do we like also decolonize that thought that giving is something from the outside, but at the same time not letting people who colonized us and have continue to benefit of this continent to say that no, we are not pay reparations, but we are just going to give funding on our own accord, on how we feel, what we feel, and let's not talk about that. Those conversations must continue. We must continue to constitute that movement of reparations and getting our communities together, and continuing to seek kind of philanthropy that we see within our inherited systems and outside. So that's what I could say about that.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. And it's true. I mean, one of the most hospitable places is African countries. You know, we share, we love each other, and then we give a lot. So that's a lot to think about, because when we think philanthropy, we think funding, it all goes to this funding organization bringing in funds. We don't stop to think about how much we give within ourselves and our community. So thank you so much for that. Omolara, I think the next question, you've actually started speaking about it in a way. It's around solidarity, actually. You know, you spoke about how collaboration, solidarity is a big part of collaboration. But what role do you think solidarity across liberation movements in Africa and in the diaspora can play in addressing the issue of colonial legacies in leadership?
Thank you for that question. I just want to tell Rosebell that I blessed the day that I came in contact with her, because the analysis around how we think about funding. One of my favorite people in the world, I wish they were a woman, but he's a man, Ousmane Sembene, you know, is a Senegalese filmmaker, a beautiful man. I really hope that there's no bad gist about him out there, because trusting men these days is very tricky. However, Ousmane Sembene, you know, made a movie around aid and how we receive money from, you know, abroad, and how people say, oh, he said, if we are not careful, we will remain a people who are just saying, Jerejev, Jerejev, Jerejev. All we will be saying is, thank you, thank you, thank you. We will never be the ones to say, hey, we want to solve that for you. We want to do that for you, even though the wealth of knowledge resides in Africa. A scientist that I love and follow, Neil deGrasse Tyson, says that where you will find the most intelligent person is on the African continent. Where you will find maybe the least intelligent person also is the African continent. Why? Because Africa is the source. But what happens to a continent ravaged and divided? Now we see the rise of xenophobia. We see the rise. Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. Yakumba, I appreciate that. You know, we see a rise in xenophobia. We see a rise in tribalism. And these things, promise you, are not organic. They are neo-colonial tools to keep us running around like headless chickens, so that some people in the global north can continue to benefit from the disarray that we continue to exist in. So when we think about solidarity, we have to think about working together to oppose neocolonialism. And how does neocolonialism express itself? In economics, in diplomacy, they call it diplomacy. But when somebody from the global north comes to the south, they are expatriates. But when we go to the global north, we are immigrants. There is a fundamental inequality that has been created by the division and the basically scattering of this continent. And we will not be able to put that together except we move our interest away from the interest of the colonizer. We cannot continue to serve this structure as a people, because whatever we do with our xenophobia, whatever we do with our tribalism, whatever we do with our fight for resources, continues to divide us for the benefit of the colonizer. So, where does solidarity come in? Our interest has to be the interest of the continent. And what is the interest of the continent? It is that currently we are neighbors who live in a place that the Portuguese in the 14th century called Africa because they found the sun. We have the opportunity to create the continent of our dreams we have the opportunity to create a continent that is truly united, that allows, that gives space in society for everyone to contribute and be recognized, that gives space for everyone in society to enjoy equality. And when I say equality, I mean substantive equality, the kind that allows everyone, no matter where they are, how they are, allows them to access the resources that we have on this continent. I don't even want to get into the extractive industries and see how we continue to divide ourselves. So the question is this: do we continue to divide ourselves along the lines of xenophobia and tribalism and fight for resources? Or do we want to find the things that truly unite us? The things that truly unite us, for example, when only a few people are free, not all of us are free. And when all of us are not free, that is, that creates a situation where we cannot produce the way we need to produce. I always make a comment about, the thing about knowledge is power, The white man came and said knowledge is power because they wanted to teach us to read and write so that we can be their secretaries and never do anything, right? However, I want to let you know that power is indeed knowledge. When you have power, you determine what people know and what people do not know. At Liberation Alliance, what we want to do is to create a situation where the power to name things comes back to this continent. We want to create a platform where the power to decide what is knowledge about us, about our past, about our future, about our now, is determined by us. When we begin to determine who we are in history, in the present, and in the future, we are able to focus our eyes on the creation of this continent that will benefit us and the people coming after us. So solidarity is not a suggestion. Solidarity is a necessity that we must achieve through critical thinking and consciousness raising. I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much.
Okay. Solidarity is not a suggestion, it is a necessity. That is a quote, and I'm going to take it. Thank you very much. Oh. We are slowly, winding down. The session has been interesting. The phase two. Drop them on the chat, and then when we're done, we can. Last question to Rosebell, actually. What steps can individuals and organizations take liberatory leadership culture in Africa?
Sorry, my connection was quite bad, so I didn't catch the question.
Oh, it's okay. What steps can individuals and organizations take to build a more decolonial and liberatory leadership culture in Africa?
Whoa, that is big. Thank you. I must say, I also liked what Omolara was talking about in terms of course, solidarity, thinking about showing up in a more holistic, intersectional way, and the fact that power and knowledge, and when you look at the kind of oppression that we're seeing currently being upped against gender diversity and different people on this continent, is very, very important. It's a question, it's a lesson in what knowledge is even seen as knowledge, right? We know, I hope all of us on this call, we know about gender diversity on the continent as having been here and as it is around the world. So there's nothing like African exceptionalism that when God reached Africa, he said, you all be man and woman and nobody else exists. So oftentimes when you hear people talk about these things, and it tells you like who informs them, when people are continuously informed by religion headed by men with power, every Sunday, they have an opportunity and privilege to inform people, whatever, from politics, from anything they don't even know about. to inculcate knowledge as this is the knowledge. So do you see what we are competing with? If systems of informing and knowledge are actually headed by patriarchs, every day, I'm talking about informal, actually information, not even in school. I'm talking about every day when you wake up, what you listen to, even on radio, patriarchs, you know, and there's like an intention, it's almost an intention to cloud out all this knowledge that is actual knowledge that is informed by our own research and knowledge systems of our countries, of our societies, that a certain knowledge, then you end up with a country where the parliament is debating a law and homosexuality law in Uganda, and all the MPs are quoting the Bible, and I want to die. You know, I'm like, when did an African country parliament start quoting the Bible? Where does the Bible play a role in my life, right? Beyond your religious belief, right? So it's very, very important to understand the intention. It's almost like the oldest means of disinformation. Every day, people are disinformed about what is actual, you know, even when they know, even when you have children who from the LGBT community, they are consuming all this. So we have to really, for me, solidarity from where I stand is very important to make sure the knowledge that we know, forming new knowledges, but also all the things that we know, old knowledges, you know, people like Sylvia Tamale have been here, Amina Mama, we have had, someone was asking about resources, we have had Professor Oriye writing about the invasion of women, you know, we have all this information since, you know, decades ago, but this information, unfortunately, is studied in the Western world. You don't find it in our universities. Even someone university educated can be as ignorant about these kind of mundane things, things which should be mundane, about gender, right? Because every day their source is informed by, you know, colonial education. Then every day is to go to a church or to go to a mosque to be told the same story, because all these things, the religion, education, the state, the media reinforce one information in our countries, which is the binary, which is violence against meted on anyone different. And it's an inherited problem that we have to continue dealing with. For me, solidarity is how do we deploy knowledges? Because we know this is what they are putting before us is not the actual knowledge. This is disinformation. So how do we get out of the colonial knowledge system that we can actually advance our people? And we are running in circles about these things, but all we are doing is continue to regurgitate colonial tropes about African people, because Africans didn't have laws about jailing. And when you find something in the colonial book, you know, it was the colonizer hoping to colonize your body, right? So the whole colonizing culture, colonizing bodies, we need to continue to get this knowledge out. For me, solidarity is very important, showing up, speaking up, but also creating this knowledge and knowing that there's been decades of disinformation against our people by colonial systems. Then the other part was like, yeah, so that's why for me, as problematic as he would be in many other instances, Julius Malema was, I couldn't believe it when I saw him leading a protest in South Africa for supporting LGBTQ communities in Uganda who are facing this law. So it's very, very important that we see these kind of solidarities. And for a long time, you've had feminist solidarity. Of course, we show up, but the fact that feminists are still on the margins, how do we get the mainstream? Julius Malema is the mainstream. For him to be able to pick up an issue of Uganda and go in the streets of South Africa and take a whole week in the news and say Uganda, this is the problem. It's very important. How do we make all these movement kind of solidarities in order to then expand our understanding in our liberation as not just in a corner. Lastly, I was going to share an example. Last week I was listening here in Dakar to I was listening to Professor Pendamba, who is a professor of history here in Senegal. And she was extensively talking about the rise of radicalism, right? All these forces have solidarity amongst each other across borders, right? So radicalism, looking at what's happening in Mali, what's happening in Burkina Faso, and all these Sahel countries, and the reality of women there, and not only women. And then when we say women in those areas, how do we ask ourselves who is on the margins? And she put forward a very important challenge, that how are we dealing with the remnants and legacies of slavery in West Africa? Because people still are living those realities. And she was talking in depth about the caste systems, Mauritania and all these countries, how we never see them in our intersectional analysis as feminists of the situation, because we're women, we're feminists, but we are not all oppressed the same, and these systems are continuing to work. So for me, it's very, very important. It's very, very important to talk about, when we talk about the radicalization, oftentimes it's about Islamic actors, you know, from the Middle East, coming Sudan, Sahel, but we have seen the evangelical radicals causing mayhem in our own countries, the Christian fundamentalism that is going on this continent, and how much it poses a threat to our survival and the rights that we have gained as women. So whether you're religious or not, the ultimate price is going to be paid on our bodies. And it's not going to be only the target you think is there currently. So that's why we have to build solidarities and remember that all women are not homogeneous. So for me, when Professor Pendo was talking about caste systems, it was very, very deep, because we're talking about legacies of slavery. And how do we inward look? How did slavery impact our countries? How is it continuing to build separations between women? When we meet in our movements, talking about leadership, talking about anything, which women are historically left behind and we don't think about? Indigenous women, women who are affected in the slavery caste systems in these societies. So it's very, very important to look at boundaries and breaking down those borders and boundaries, both intercommunal and in terms of colonial borders. So it's very, very important. For me, solidarity is very key and practiced every day in everything, looking for who is not at the table. Should I be at this table? And is there someone who should be at this table? Should I take a step back? It's a constant evaluation of power every day. What power do you have? What power don't you have? How do you give up your own power? Because this is not only, we're not only asking people when we're in rooms, for example, working with white women, working with the white dominated spaces. It's not actually only asking about the imperial system. It's also realizing that we're also part of that system, and what we get, what we access gives us privilege. So asking ourselves, when do I step back? Who do I want to, who do we listen to? It's very, very important in how we ask ourselves, how we don't remain quiet because we think that, oh my God, like the LGBT issue is very, very controversial. Yes, our rights are not going to, we are not going to gain our rights by being nice. You know, even your ability to dress the way you are in many places right now is being debated as women, right? And so you think about that, and all these things have are linked to patriarchy, to colonization. So it's very important to know that you cannot just afford to keep quiet because another group is facing persecution, because that persecution is very, very related, and it's very close. If they manage to subdue that group, they're coming for you. So it's very important, and we have always known this. So for me, it's like analysis of power on an individual group level with contextual analysis, like, am I from a dominant group? How do I pull back? How do I not? How do I make sure other women show up and take up that space that I'm in? Thank you.
Wow.
Wow, thank you so very much. Thank you. That's such a beautiful submission. And I love that statement. We are not going to get our rights by being nice. I think that's a very, very powerful statement. I see that Oluwatoyin Adejowo has indicated you want to ask a question. If you do, please can you unmute your mic? Let's do that quickly. We're running out of time. So our wonderful guest.
Okay.
Wonderful. Okay, beautiful. Hello, Oluwatoyin. Good afternoon. Hi.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank Liberation Alliance. This has been a wow session. Very, very insightful, educative, thoroughly beautiful. So thank you very much. And I'd like, of course, I'd like to say a big thank you to the speakers as well. I would just like to briefly comment and maybe further interrogate what Omolara said about developing organically, so organic development in Africa, and how colonialism has robbed us of that opportunity too, and also how it has foisted upon us colonial concepts. So for instance, when she talked about that, the thing that came to my mind was the concept of democracy, that and how democracy has been presented to us in Africa and how it has been sold to us as the holy grail of governance. And I've always pondered that, and I've always pondered whether it is. And I think that it is time for African countries, because really, I'm of the opinion that democracy has failed us. So really, I believe that it's time for African countries to begin to re-examine and to interrogate, some of these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Toyin. So I think, Nana, I would like to just comment quickly on,
Yes, please.
on just reflect a little bit on some of the things that Rosebell shared in terms of solidarity. So one of the things that we think about when we think about solidarity is the fact that no one is voiceless. Everyone has got a voice. So we just need to keep quiet long enough to hear other voices come on board. That is number one. Number two is the idea around intersectionality, right? The idea that we have to consider the multiple forms of oppression experienced by people is something that is a good tool for solidarity. And I just want to thank Rosebell for sharing those deep thoughts around building the blocks for solidarity, because for us to get to that point where we are a people who have the same fight, there is a need for us to share, an ideology. And that ideology, or in this case, obviously, is, feminist perspectives to issues. But then the question now remains, how do we move from the margins to the center? That is the question I want everyone to go away with today from this conversation. We need to move these conversations into spaces where our voices are heard and regarded as building blocks of our liberation on this continent. And we have to think about our feminist work as much more than, we're just looking after these groups of women. When Rosebell mentioned Mauritania, it took me back to 2018 when I went to Mauritania, and I realized that Black people in the metropolitan cities still had to carry IDs. And this is 2018 here. So if we are finding that Black men who are able to access the city have to carry IDs, do we want to just take a moment to imagine the lived realities of the women in those spaces? This is what I want us to keep in our mind. This is the work that the Liberation Alliance wants to do. We want to help everyone to realize that there is more to do to this work. We want to be able to provide one another, us, you, everyone on the continent, with the tools to build a movement that will last. Because the world will continue to go in the direction of chaos. and it will engage in entropy. And when entropy occurs, everything goes back. What shall remain? We want the words of women to remain. We want our activism to remain. We want our labor to stand the test of time. So these are the kind of things that I think about when we are thinking about, solidarity, is that we are trying to build the blocks, not just even for us at this time, but also build the blocks for when the generation after us needs a reference point. When it is their turn to build their own blocks of emancipation. I love Buki's comment in the chat box. She says, we are not equipped to build movements and those that last. So we need more of this. So the question and the challenge I'm giving to everyone is this: what do we need to build movements that last? What kind of information do we need to unearth? What kind of democratization of power, of knowledge, of agency needs to occur for us to achieve the liberation for this continent of our dreams? And how can feminist Pan-Africanism become a center topic that we begin to push on this continent? Because Pan-Africanism is not masculine. Thank you so much.
Oh, wow. Oh my God. I really wish that we could go on and on and on with this conversation, because this has been so interesting. And not to even talk about the conversation going on in the chat, just another, wealth of consciousness, wealth of knowledge sharing, and the power that we have here in this time, in this moment, is just so much. And we are so grateful. At Liberation Alliance Africa, we are so, so grateful, for everyone who made out the time to come here today to, be with us and share this moment with us. We are so grateful.
Nana, please, there is one last hand up from Bellamy.
Omolara and the wonderful Rosebell, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for letting us in on some of the thoughts and this processes. Thank you so much. We do not take it for granted.
Hello, Nana. There's one last hand from
Bellamy.
Oh,
okay. I didn't see that. Oh, okay. Please, Bellamy, let's just have your question or your comment before we go. Quickly, please. Hello, Bellamy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Yes, hi. I am Uganda and South Sudanese, born and raised in Italy. And I really, really, really admire the work of Rosebell. I'm a very radical feminist, and it's incredible to me to see that the Ugandan feminists of nowadays are radical as well, because I feel it's the only way to make some sort of change. I just want to say, and I hope that both Rosebell, Itunu, and all the other African feminists who are currently residing and working the continent are doing everything in their power to take care of themselves mentally. I am, quote unquote, an activist in Italy, working on anti-racism and feminism in Italy. And I've been struggling, especially in the past 3 years mentally, because being in the forefront and giving all your energies for a cause and seeing that change is comes so slowly, is very draining mentally, emotionally, and physically. And so I would like to know if they would like to share what they're doing in order to, because African women are very resilient. I feel like we can fight until we cannot fight anymore, but we cannot fight if we are not alive, to bring our causes, to make sure that we can see our goals coming to fruition. So I would like to know if they're doing anything, and if they're also promoting some sort of self-care. And if not, I really hope that they are prioritizing that as well. Because yes, we are fighters, because we have no other choice. I feel like all African feminists, they become feminists and activists by necessity. But, we also need to prioritize our own self and mental health, especially you guys that work in the continent. It's hard for me that I'm in Italy, quote unquote, in the Western world, so I cannot even imagine. how much harder it is in African countries. Anyway, thank you so much. This was a very insightful conversation.
Wow, thank you so very much. Would Rosebell or Omolara like to add to that in any way before we go? Because the importance of self-care cannot be overemphasized.
Thank you, Bellamy. Thank you so much. Definitely very, very important for us to remember, you know, not to, sometimes you feel like the weight of the world, but it's important to know when to step back, step aside. And even when I say the role of solidarity is very, very key. An example is recently what is going on in Uganda, and of course being visible and knowing, having worked with different international media on different issues, there's always this pressure like, oh, you have to speak out on this. I'm like, yeah, I'm speaking out in different ways, but the people you need to be speaking to are actually the people who are at the heart of this legislation, who are living in this hell. So always knowing you don't have to take the space all the time, and stepping back, like I was saying, knowing what ways, because there's always another person who can do the work you're doing. I think even when, you know, once you start it, you feel like you can't stop. It's very important to stop, to take breaks, to what I do is sometimes I take breaks and do other things actually that interest me. Like I like fashion, I like different things, just to take away to take away, not even fighting in the same way every day, but also thinking, how do I get out? But also the reality is that the risk is very high. You know, our lives are not protected, and it becomes extremely difficult to, because also sometimes it's like, okay, if I say this is what is going on. Sometimes you have an exodus of people leaving in the country because this is what they want, right? They target you. If you leave, everybody think, oh, there's a panic, everybody's coming for us. So how do we balance that to step out and also think of continuation, community, and where do you get support within the community? And sometimes the support is actually can be lacking because we don't have investments in the work in the well-being of activists. We see that people continue unless something big happens to you. That's when people say, oh, what's going on? But it's not something you bring up and say, oh, I'm not feeling well, and people take that seriously, you know. So, and also we have been raised as African women, as African people of different genders, that, you know, we have to hang in there. So it really has to be bad, right? We think that people are going to like judge us, or you're just looking like you're living a soft life, right, while everything is falling apart. But I think it's very important to describe that at a personal level, what interests you, what you like. For me, writing, actually, I find it therapeutic when I'm feeling angry and mad. If I don't write, I feel like I'm losing it. So writing kind of feels like I'm putting this to use in that way, although it's not relaxing, totally out of it. But I think it's important to think of that daily and find ways. And also knowing that this care is also expensive, right? It's very expensive. We are also barely surviving. We're doing work without much pay. So it becomes difficult. But if we can find those things that interest us, like step out, you know, go to the countryside, visit a place, find friends, do things that interest you. I know like the economic situation is hard, but finding those, but also encouraging whoever is working in this space to actually invest in the well-being of activists, just like we fight every day for other people to realize that we need to actually keep healthy ourselves, you know. Like someone said, what's the use of the revolution if I can't dance? I want to dance as much as I want to fight. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I don't have much to add to that. I think when it comes to self-care, I want us to realize that self-care means something different to everyone. And when it comes to rest, we have to think of rest as something that is as important as the work. The work is as important as the rest, and the rest is as important as the work, because it will be the beauty, it will be pleasing to our colonizers to make us martyrs. They will rather give us, name a street after us than give us liberation. So don't let them use your name to make a street. Be alive and enjoy the liberation yourself. And how can we do that? By honoring the collective. And how can we honor the collective? By understanding that even though capitalism promotes individualism and they make us think that we are in competition with one another, we truly are not. So my self-care advice really is free your mind and enjoy your life. So free your mind, enjoy your life. This work is something that we will do because we are liberation minded, but also we want to be part of the people that will enjoy the fruits. In my village, they say, if they use your head to break a coconut, it is not likely that you will be part of the people that will eat the coconut, either because you have a headache or because they have broken your head. So my encouragement to us, because especially for people who live with mental illness, our encouragement to us is that we should look after ourselves and reject capitalism that thinks that we must labor until we break down before we stop. It's important for us to labor. It's important for us to stand in solidarity, but it is also important to connect with one another and share hugs and share joy and just, live our lives in the way that our ancestors are proud of, but that also us, in hindsight, we can say, yes, I am thankful for the opportunity to live as a full human being. So that's all I'm going to add to what Rosebell has shared with us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you all so much. This has been such a wonderful and inspirational session. Big thank you to our speakers. Both of you have been phenomenal and wonderful. Thank you so very much for taking out the time to be with us today. And to every single person, who joined in, once again, a very big thank you from all of us at Liberation Alliance Africa. I want to remind you that this is the first part of a 5-part series on the DCL series. We'll be looking at other ways in which colonialism has affected us as a continent, and sharing. And if you want to keep tabs on the remaining series, you can always, I think a link to our MailChimp has been provided, so you can, get the information as it's happening. You can also follow us on our Twitter handle, Liberation AA, or you can follow us on Instagram, Liberation Alliance. We're always open to collaborations. We're open to, just sharing and caring, like it has rightly been said. We have to be together. We have to come together to achieve all our dreams for the continent. Once again, a very big thank you from all of us at Liberation Alliance Africa. Thank you so much. My name is Nana Sule. Once again, it's been such an honor to be a part of this conversation. Rosebell, thank you. Omolara, thank you so much. Thank you, every single one of you. Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful weekend, because we're entering into the weekend. Have a wonderful weekend, and we hope to see you on the subsequent series. We'll share this recording, of course, and other information with everyone who has registered. All the resources that have been shared today, we'll forward them, including the link to this recording. So thank you once more from all of us at Liberation Alliance Africa. We say bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Rosebell. I appreciate this conversation. Always a joy to learn from you.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely. Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Diakumba, Bellamy, thank you. Thank you so much to Jama from Jama from Gambia. Lovely to see you here as well. I appreciate everyone.
Hey, Lord, we don't want to leave that Zoom. Usually we run away from Zoom, but I'm here. You should see me. I'm cleaning, cooking, doing everything at the same time. I said, today, if I get fired, I don't care. I'm with my sister. I love you. Bye-bye.
Love you guys too.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Uma, take care. Bye.
Nana, you can end the meeting.